Good afternoon. My name is Chris Grimes, and I'm the executive editor at Nikkei Asia. And it's my great pleasure, on behalf of my colleagues and myself, to welcome India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, to our conference. Dr. Jaishankar is a veteran diplomat. He's been India's ambassador to the United States, High Commissioner to Singapore. He was the ambassador to the Czech Republic, and he's held other key postings, including Moscow and Tokyo. So more recently, he was president of global corporate affairs at Tata Sons. And with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to Dr. Jaishankar. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Naotoshi Okada, Nikkei Chairman and Group CEO. Mr. Tsuyoshi Hasebe, Nikkei President and CEO. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I have great pleasure in addressing the 26th Future of Asia Conference organized by Nikkei on shaping the post-COVID era with a specific relevance to Asia's role. A year and a half ago, as the enormity of the COVID-19 pandemic dawned on the world, we were truly confronted by a black swan event. Since then, even though we may have addressed some facets of a very complex challenge, it continues its devastating course across geographies. We in India are going through a particularly difficult situation right now. Understandably, the world's attention is focused primarily on the public health response. The economic consequences of the pandemic were, of course, immediately felt, though its social ones are now also starting to be realized. What perhaps is yet to be fully comprehended is its long-term impact on the global order, including on the future of Asia. How is the COVID-19 reshaping the world? Amongst others, by changing the perceptions and calculations of nations about each other and the world. Specifically by, one, bringing out the value of trust and transparency and the importance of reliable supply chains. Two, heightening risk aversion to address overdependence. Three, focusing on the need to create greater global capacities so that pandemic-scale challenges are more effectively met. And four, by doing so, promoting decentralized globalization and establishing resilient supply chains to de-risk the world economy. This pandemic may be the most serious in living memory, but it should be seen as a recurring challenge and not as a one-off. It demands international cooperation on a scale that could not have even been conceived of earlier. No national capacity, however large, can be adequate. And just overflows from such capacities are clearly not enough to address of the present capacities. What we will now have to conceptualize is re-engineering the way the world works to prepare for and mitigate such cataclysmic events. COVID-19 has certainly triggered debates on issues like supply chains, global governance, social responsibility, and even ethics. But for many of us gathered here today, it equally encourages an objective assessment of the contemporary world so that we are better prepared for tomorrow. As nations contemplate the world, there is no question that COVID-19 has moved the needle in the direction of risks as opposed to opportunity. This is reflected in national security acquiring a more expansive definition. In the past, defense, politics, and intelligence drove calculations, with some extrapolation into domains like resources, energy, or technology. With some notable exceptions. Its demands were balanced out by the requirements of global exchanges, economic efficiency, and perhaps even by social habits. Now, these trends, in fact, became stronger as the globalization mantra took deeper root. The pandemic, however, saw capabilities leveraged, commitments dishonored, supply chains blocked, logistics disrupted, and shortages created, with all the accompanying anxieties. When this applied to PPEs, medicines, or ventilators, we all woke up to health security. Those who saw their essential supplies under threat now realize the value of food security. When economies slowed down due to material disruptions, we now understood the need for manufacturing security. Call it buying rationally, middle-class concerns, dual circulation, or self-reliance. There is no question that many polities are seeking to hedge against excessive exposure internationally. In parts of the world previously more sanguine about their own globalization, the concept of strategic autonomy has started to gain more traction. The efficiency of others may have strengthened bottom lines in good times. They are now seen as too vulnerable in difficult ones. Disruptions also raised natural concerns about long-term reliability and resilience. In many areas, it became apparent that the global economy was dangerously dependent on specific production sectors. Even the world of services is understanding the consequences of over-reliance on limited sources. Whether it is tourism or travel, mobility or offshoring, the value of multiplicity and redundancy is realized more than ever before. The nature of the COVID experience has also brought to fore concerns of trust and transparency. Opacity can no longer be overlooked. It has real implications for the rest of the world. It was bad enough to be confronted with shortages and disruptions. Worse, that they could become pressure points. There are also worries that the financial distress caused by the pandemic could lead to new vulnerabilities. Consequently, strategic autonomy is now being debated as greater self-sufficiency, stronger partnerships, and multiplicity of options, all of which are perceived as integral to risk mitigation. These, of course, could have geo-economic implications in the days ahead. Behavioral aspects have also played their part. Stresses induced narrower definitions of self-interest and departures from collective endeavors. Few practiced what they preached. Some even stopped preaching altogether. Inadvertently, insights emerged on the interplay of culture, interests, and values. Pluralistic societies remained more engaged with the world, and international solidarity was stronger in the South. Those who saw the world also as a workplace rather than just as a marketplace had a deeper interest, obviously, in remaining connected. Now, given that interests are the primary driving force, global outlook of nations reflects their exposure to global supply chains. This holds true as much for priorities like vaccine production as for the larger economic routine. But somewhere, there are factors beyond comfort and gains at play. An outlook that envisages the world as a family where exceptionalism is not the main prism will encourage a shared approach. And that is important because the pandemic is a global challenge that requires nothing less than global solutions. If its overall result is to compel us to approach the big issues of our time with greater unity and cohesion, it may well have done us more than a small favor. Changes within societies are also important to recognize. Many societies, and I can certainly speak for India in this regard, many societies have discovered the real potential of the digital in this process. Whether it was in terms of government or business or indeed education and health, the digital medium helped provide better and more effective solutions. Few believe that they will come through the COVID experience unaffected in their decision making or indeed in their debates. But traumatic as it has been, the essential realities of our times cannot be denied. Our globalization is deep and pervasive and will continue to shape activities and strategies. What the COVID has brought out are some of the particular risks of its current incarnation. The task before us is therefore to de-risk that, even while pursuing other objectives, including rapid economic recovery. In doing that, we should take into account that this is both a more multipolar world and a more rebalanced one. In plain words, that means more players and greater capabilities whose full potential needs to be aggressively explored. It is only then that we can strengthen global resilience and confidence. Clearly, that means decentralized globalization with multiple supply chains and more engines of growth. It is only with such redundancy that the world can face the next pandemic better than we are doing the current one. Now, making that happen requires decisions, initiative, and consultations at many levels. India, on its part, can help strengthen and de-risk the global economy through more effective partnerships. With Japan and Australia today, we are working on a supply chain resilience initiative, where the Quad arrangement that also involves the United States is concerned. Its agenda today covers vaccine collaboration, critical and emerging technologies, semiconductors, supply chains, critical materials, and of course, connectivity, amongst others. Recent Indian summits with the European Union and the United Kingdom that saw advancement on FTAs are also noteworthy in that regard. Meeting the health and medical requirements of the world effectively requires a mature recognition of the global nature of the underlying supply chains. Barring a select few, it cannot be addressed purely nationally, and in fact needs a collaboration of a very different order. The answer to the pandemic challenge is to expand and smoothen global flows while creating confidence that its outcomes are for the benefit of the entire world. Better international cooperation can also be facilitated by improved national capacities. So if India is to make a real contribution to Asian and global economic recovery, it can start by helping itself. Even while the COVID-19 was ongoing last year, bold reforms were undertaken in industry, agriculture, labor, and education. Perhaps most relevant to this audience are the production-linked incentive schemes to attract and encourage manufacturing in 13 sectors, which include mobiles and electronic components, KSM and APIs for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, electronic and technology products, drugs, telecom and networking products, food products, white goods, high-efficiency solar PV models, auto and auto components, ACC battery, textile products, and specialty steel. We aim to make manufacturing in India globally competitive by removing sectoral disabilities, creating economies of scale, and ensuring efficiencies. By creating a level playing field and encouraging a component ecosystem, It will integrate India deeper into the global supply chain. Already, the global response to the PLI initiative has been strong. Coupled with an improvement in India's position in the World Bank's ease of doing business rankings, we are now, last year we were 63, we used to be 142 in 2014. This would enhance our economic relevance. But beyond this, the world also has a natural interest in the direction, pace, and quality of India's development. Much of what India is to build still lies ahead of us. We thus have a unique opportunity to embrace a greener and more technology-driven future. But this needs the requisite global partnerships and resources. Let us appreciate the implications of 140 million households moving into the middle class, even as another 20 million reach the high income bracket. The winds of change have been blowing harder in India, especially in the last 7 years. They can make universal access to power, piped water, and affordable housing realizable goals within a generation as India urbanizes like the rest of the world. A smart cities mission covering 100 locations is addressing challenges holistically through retrofitting, redevelopment, greenfield, and pan-city development. And as I have stressed, even as India builds more, it builds greener. A renewable target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 seeks to transform its energy profile. As one of the few G20 economies adhering to its Paris commitments, its 15% energy efficiency savings, its shift to LED lighting with more than 367 million bulbs, moving 80 million households from biomass to LPG cooking, and being among the top 3 nations to expand forest cover in the last decade are examples of its seriousness. The changes in the environment are paralleled by progress in human resources. National campaigns of financial inclusion, educating daughters, Digital India, Clean India, Skill India, Water Mission, etc., enable us today to directly fund 400 million vulnerable citizens and provide food support to 800 million during the COVID challenge. I would urge you to look at these trends, not just as a national accomplishment in the making, but as improving global human resources. In ensuring economic recovery, of course, Indo-Japan relations have a very notable role. In fact, one, I would argue, even beyond Asia. Our partnership is seen today as among the most natural in the region. Japan is a valuable partner in these national campaigns that I have spoken about, and consistently supportive of our infrastructure development, including through ODA loans. In fact, Japanese supported projects are among the most successful infrastructure examples, most recently the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor and the dedicated Western Trade Corridor. Its long-standing FDI footprint in India is steadily expanding, covering 1,455 companies as of 2021, and more than half of them are in manufacturing. New industrial collaborations are in the making even as we speak. And Japan's contribution in skills enhancement is visible in 16 Japan-India institutes for manufacturing and 5 Japan-endowed courses. Japan is, of course, closely associated with the growth of our auto sector and, in fact, also with the introduction of metros in India. The bullet train initiative is the current flagship project. Our cooperation reflects the needs of the time, whether it is through a fund to support startups or an agreement to receive skilled workers from India. Our strong strategic convergence is evident in our annual summit, 2+2 meetings, defense and military activities, as well as cooperation at regional and multilateral forums. Distinguished guests, the COVID challenge has certainly created a stronger case for greater international cooperation, be it in vaccine production or to facilitate economic recovery. Those with shared interests and common values will find it easier to forge stronger partnerships. To make a real difference, the global order must address the concerns and issues that the pandemic has thrown up. I thank this conference for the opportunity to share my thoughts in that regard, and I'm confident that its deliberations will help us find pathways to better solutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
For the toll that COVID-19 has been taking in India, and we wish you a speedy recovery. So I'd like to ask just a pair of COVID-related questions, actually. The first is whether you believe that the U.S. and other wealthy nations are doing everything that they should be doing right now to help developing nations and nations that are still struggling with the virus to combat it. And then secondly, just about in India, you were very successful in the COVID fight in the first year, really, but what can you tell us about what went wrong with this terrible second wave? Thank you.
Well, look, in terms of the first question that you raised, I think we in India are actually experiencing tremendous international generosity. As we struggle with the second wave, we find the world is standing by us. You know, they are addressing some of our immediate needs, especially on the oxygen front. When it comes to medicines, you know, you have drugs like remdesivir, whose demands have shot up. So I would say really across the world, and the United States, of course, has been notable in that regard. We've been getting exceptional support, and you know, both in practical terms and in terms of morale, standing by you, and things are tough. I think it's made a big difference. In a somewhat longer time frame, I think the big conversation which is underway is on vaccines. As you know, the world has to vaccinate its way out of the pandemic. And vaccine production is the big challenge. And here, South Africa and India had led an initiative to make exceptions to the patent regime in order to expand vaccination. And the United States has actually has responded to it in some ways, I would say, with an open mind. So this is an ongoing conversation, which will involve a lot of other countries as well. Related to that is also the vaccine production chain, because this, vaccines, as you probably know, are a very complex and extensive global supply chain. So it's important that the supply chain delivers if we are to expand vaccine production. That too is something which is very much under discussion. So I think a lot of what today is a conversation between the developed and the developing, if you would, is about making the vaccine accessible, both in terms of production and costing, making it affordable, obviously, in that regard. And it's absolutely vital that there is a global understanding of this. On your second issue, what really, why is the second wave so different? Look, you have to really understand how dramatically the second wave unfolded. I mean, till end of February, the daily case rates in India were about 10,000. And within a matter of 10 weeks, it went up from 10,000 a day to more than 400,000 a day. That's a 40x increase. Now, after the first wave, it was not that people didn't think about the second wave. After all, that's why, for example, there was a focus on vaccination, which was why overall there was attempts to expand the hospital infrastructure to create a oxygen supply system. If you look back, it is quite clear, most modeling focused on a possible second wave being something more than the first wave. I don't think, in fact, I know that really nobody saw a 4x wave coming at us as the second wave. So when it hit us, I think the immediate requirement was to respond to the challenges of the moment. I mean, there would be the debates, could you have foreseen it? Could you have responded differently? I think the responsibility of the government, though, was to address the immediate situation which developed as the second wave unfolded. And if you look at it, again, I want to give you a sense of the kind of pressures on us. As I said, if you had nationally a caseload of 400,000, there were cities, for example, the city where I live, Delhi, where the daily case rate increases were almost 30,000 a day. And at 30,000 a day, there is no city in the world which can take that kind of pressure. And this time, the strains, the 117 and the 1617, they were far more virulent. People went into hospitals earlier, they stayed longer. So, one of the big challenges which arose was an enormous spike in the oxygen demand. Our regular consumption of liquid medical oxygen was about 1,000 metric tons a day, little more than that. Now, suddenly from 1,000, it went up to 8,000. Now, you had to do everything in your power to meet that demand. So we were really, trying to find ways by which oxygen was supplied to cities on a much higher scale than people could have anticipated. And so you actually had to ramp up your oxygen transportation capacity. We actually acquired more tankers. We set up oxygen tanks in hospitals because storage was an issue. It might sort of give you a sense of our response that in the space, I would say, of maybe the last about, say, 6 weeks, we've actually run almost 200 dedicated oxygen trains and 730 flights in order to transport oxygen from one part of the country to another. Now, similarly, you had a huge drugs challenge because there are, I think, about 10 drugs which are part of the protocol for treating COVID. Maybe about another 7, I think, which are regularly in use in addition to that. So the demands for these also spiked, and they spiked not by 20%, 30%. They spiked by 3x, 4x, 5x. So how do you meet that kind of surge and also, rapidly expand your bed capacity, deal with the testing demands which come out of it? Some of this is obviously, a lot of this is primarily domestic. Now, some of it, for example, oxygen supply, tankers. Also, we had to look internationally to see what we could do. And I can tell you as a foreign ministry, this has been really our primary preoccupation over the last 2 months. So it has been a huge challenge, but I think now the numbers are starting to come down. it's still too early, to say anything more than that. I think today's daily number was 276,000 cases, which is like, our peak was about 415, I think. So you can see the trend is downwards, but it is moving around in different parts of the country. We are a big country, so you can have it in one state or a set of states, and then it moves to something else. So it is a big challenge. We are completely focused on the challenge, how to address it. We very much value the support that we have got from the rest of the world, whether it is in expressions of solidarity or very practical help in that regard, including, I must add, since I'm addressing this conference from Japan. So it does make a difference. But for me, the big takeaway is this, which is the thrust of what I have said in my speech, that treat this as a global problem. Because if you don't recognize it's a global problem, you will not be searching for global solutions. And anything less than a global solution, the world will fall short.
Thank you. It's an awesome challenge that you're facing, and thanks for sharing those details with us. I'm afraid we're out of time, so we're going to have to make another invitation to have you speak to us again, because there's so many other things that we want to talk about, the Quad and other things, the supply chain. But for now, sincere thanks from all of us at Nikkei for speaking to us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure.
スブラマニアム・ジャイシャンカル外相、グライムスさん